able to get in touch with the team in Russia though? I mean, I'm just processing my own visa for like, you could do like a 2 or 3 year multi-entry visa and like,
Yeah,
go whenever you want. It's much
yeah.
easier to do that.
That's what we're doing actually. So I've got
Cool.
a new general manager here. I just hired her, and she's going to be helping with me with that. She's a native Russian speaker,
Perfect.
so she'll be helping with all of that. And I put her in touch with Sergey and the team via Telegram. I don't
Perfect.
think we heard back from them yet, but hopefully they'll be responding to us soon.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can get rocking whenever you want.
Okay, great. So I have to confess that since our last conversations, I haven't made a lot of progress or updates on Casper. I was just completely swamped with all of the end of year transactions and getting the Pyrofex deal done and getting the ventures deal done. So that was that took up the vast majority of my time um, when I wasn't trying to have a little bit of fun with my family in Hawaii.
That's understandable.
And then the one thing I will say is I spent some time with Mike um, talking a little bit about some of my concerns on the quantum compute side. And I think people really misunderstand me. So I'll just go on record. I'm not concerned about quantum compute and cryptography issues. I think those are far enough out that we don't have to worry about it. However, I am very concerned about quantum compute and consensus, and not so much concerned in the sense that it's going to break things, but I just want to be future proof. Just to lay out the argument, you don't need Casper if you have quantum teleportation, right? If Alice and Bob can instantaneously know a particular state, um, just by inspecting a qubit, then they're good, right? They don't need to run Casper.
Right, because it's no longer an asynchronous situation.
Yeah,
They're effectively sitting at the same table having a discussion.
yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Um, and so you can do all kinds of really nice leader election algorithms and other things. Um, Alex Norton recently showed, like in 2014, he showed that the Penn-Godden proposal that you need, that all quantum leader election protocols involve W states, was false. He found a symmetric state, which he called W tilde, which allows you to do leader election. So there's all kinds of really fun games you can play, and more importantly, you don't the physical infrastructure to realize this, as opposed to general purpose compute, is much less onerous. Um, uh, and 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 in fact, Credit Suisse, to the best of my knowledge, has for like 10 years been looking at these kinds of quantum teleportation based financial transactions. Um, uh, so, so they've been running experiments exactly along these lines. So it's not like this is a crazy ass idea from some wacko. This is something that's been actively being investigated for quite some time. So, so that's my concern. And so, what I want to make sure is that our architecture is modular in the first place, so we can plug and play with respect to the consensus algorithm. Um, and I also want to make sure that since that we can deal with heterogeneous um, networks, heterogeneous networks where you have different consensus algorithms. So one can imagine that over the next 20 years, there's a big build out of the um, uh, of the blockchain infrastructure, and along comes a quantum-based consensus algorithm. And so for some period of time, there's going to be a rollout. And during that rollout, there needs to be the ability to reason that, the consensus of the end-to-end system is related to the consensus of each of the subsystems. So that's been what's motivating my characterization of consensus as trace. In part. I just want to make the infrastructure future proof, at least for the next 20, 30 years. And then, after that, other people can figure it out.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so that's kind of the extent of my update. Michael, anything from you?
Yeah, I've got a few updates. So I had mentioned possibly briefly here that I had some data coming out of my simulation that was showing the total amount of political capital could actually grow exponentially. Like it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be bounded.
Oh, okay.
And so I investigated that a little bit more. I wrote down a sort of high-level dynamical system that was easy enough to reason about on paper instead of having to write a simulation for it. And came out with a condition, basically, that was leading to the exponential growth of political capital, and also a condition for keeping the amount fixed and stable. So having that characterized is I think a good step forward. But the practicality of sort of keeping this under control is still something that we might want to talk about. So essentially, there's 3 tunable parameters that I was working with in this dynamical system. One is the number of validators, which is just a function of whoever is joining the network. So that's something that in principle you can know by just having some keeping track of basically who your node is talking to. Then there's the fraction F that we've talked about before, this fraction of political capital that you earn by acknowledging. And up until this point, this has been something that I just considered a free parameter.
I see.
But this actually fixes it. Basically, you need to be a particular value in order to keep the amount of political capital stable, which also makes sense, right? If you're earning crazy amounts by acknowledging, then obviously you can get a lot of political capital out of that. And then the final parameter is the one that's sort of the difficult one to keep on top of, is the fraction of blocks that are acknowledgements as compared to proposals.
Sure.
So that changes over time depending on the strategies that the different validators are employing, right? If you go through phases where there's a lot of acknowledgement happening versus phases where everybody's trying to propose blocks, that number could shift quite a bit. But the result is very clean. If you take those 3 things and multiply them together, you have to get a half. If you get a half, then you're guaranteed to have the amount of political capital stay stable. If you get something bigger than a half, you'll end up with exponential growth. And the more it exceeds 1/2, the faster that growth will be. And similarly, if it's under a half, then your political capital will exponentially decay. So as long as we tune the fraction f so that it's equal to 1/2 times n times a, then everything's good. But being able to do that tuning reliably might be a tricky thing to do in practice.
Sure, of course, but that's actually really interesting information. That suggests that um, it is really important to know um, as a part of the bonding and unbonding procedure, because that would require that we modify political capital, right? The supply of political capital.
Well, so I've never been playing with the supply of the political capital directly. This is more about the rate at which the supply is changing, right?
No,
So
I understand, but the point is you start with a supply at Genesis block, right?
that's right. Yeah.
And then but then at the moment that you're going to change the number of validators, you really have adjusted that fraction. So what are you going to do?
Well, so I think this sort of comes down to um, there has to be a process running that's correcting F all the time based on recent activity in your node's observed network, right? You sort of see the number of active validators and you see how often blocks are being acknowledged. And this just, I think, needs to be running in the background. Um, but I think there's then potential problems around like people gaming that somehow like isolating their node temporarily so that their fraction jumps up so that they get a whole bunch of political capital and then go join the main network again. And like, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's I mean, you're working under the assumption that political capital isn't a conserved quantity there. Like you haven't related the political capital you earn from acknowledgements to political capital spent on promotions. So as long as what's earned is what's spent, then you maintain that, right? You'll get that always.
Well, so I never tried to keep political capital conserved, if only because that's a difficult thing to do, right? Like because of the asynchrony and distributed nature of the whole thing, trying to keep the global amount of political capital conserved is difficult. You basically need to have consensus on top of your consensus in order to make that happen, right?
No, I think well, yeah. So that's the. So I understand you're if you don't keep it conserved, then you have this correcting process. But if you do keep it conserved, then you have this other issue of how does it, uh, how do the updates with respect to political capital happen? And so I think probably what we should do is spend some time walking through putting the updates on political capital into the blocks, into the subsequent blocks, right? So, and making sure that that's, trustworthy and secure. Right. Basically, it's just walking through the arguments that Chris was making at the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, I think that'll be better than having a correction.
Oh yeah, because then how do you trust not everyone is? How do you trust that everyone's running the same correction process? And
yeah,
mm-hmm. Right. So that's just as security ridden. It's problematic for security as anything else.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm happy to walk through the arguments, and I think we can really put it to rest. If we can't get it to be conserved, then we have to think, well, this is a bright idea but didn't work.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think if we can make it conserved, then the only thing left is to make sure that you can tune the pressure so that people don't delay. And I think that becomes a lot easier if it is conserved.
Yeah, because then you sort of already have a meta layer on the blockchain, which you can probably leverage the same sort of meta layer to do the fee distribution as well as keep track of the political capital.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think we're that really puts a fine point on being able to prove that we can make it conserved, or refute once and for all refute that political capital is a conservable quantity, and either one of those results is great, because then we know for a fact that whether or not this decision procedure works.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll spend time thinking about that then.
Cool. No, that's awesome. That's really cool.
One other update,
yes,
on sort of a separate line of reasoning was about the fork choice rule. I talked last time about having a proof of work style fork choice rule, where instead of picking the chain with the most work put into it, you pick the chain with the most political capital put into it. And I suppose this becomes slightly moot if we do sort of end up with like the fee distribution process that encourages people to get consensus more efficiently. But I did find and sort of show quantitatively that the proof of work style fork choice rule has far less branching occurring than the ghost fork choice rule. So basically by making chains that are really long worth more, essentially, it encourages people to always build on longer chains, and so it discourages branching in that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so then we can, that's exactly right. Yeah, you want to give some greater weight to non-branching. Don't explore unless you want the network to explore options.
But I think exploring options is still possible, right? It's
just more expensive.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so you have to really want to do it. You can't just sort of willy-nilly go off in some random direction.
Yeah.
And I think that is a positive feature because it makes the consensus less meandering.
Yes. Agreed. That's cool. This is really, really good. And very exciting. It's good to have your additional input into this process.
Great, thank you.
No, it's very stimulating. Cool. I'm sorry we don't have Nate or Danny or Vlad, but hopefully they'll show up next week.
Yeah, when we're back to the normal schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I'm happy yielding back the time if everyone else is.
Yep, I'm good.
Sweet. All right. Well, see you next. Well, actually, Michael, if you're, can you come to the community hangout and talk about these results?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Very good. Okay. Talk to you guys in a little while.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.